To understand the origins of the McKeague case, you really have to go back to October 2016, when there were reports of his disappearance at a very local level in the local press and local news websites. So it wasn't actually being covered to any great extent by the national press, and it was really just a missing persons case. To counteract this lack of coverage, Corrie Mckeague's family set up the Find Corrie Facebook group, which was, well, actually, I believe it was originally set up by a teenage boy, and then members of his family, his mother Nicola Urquhart, his two brothers, and his uncle Tony Ringe became involved in running the Find Corrie Facebook. The Facebook group was designed to provide updates on the search, to seek information from the public, and later to fundraise for funding to continue the search for Corrie. The Facebook group was effective because public interest and the public imagination was captured by the disappearance, particularly the visuals, the CCTV footage. People would try to find faces in the CCTV. They would try to find all kinds of odd artifacts, and they were looking to see what was happening to him that night. So it was a very visual news story. Now, it gained attention and it gained traction with people in social media, but it wasn't really still wasn't getting a lot of attention from the press, certainly not the national press. And therefore, people flocked to the Find Corrie Facebook group as a way of getting these updates, and it became a source of alternative news. To many people who joined that group, the information given out was actually what they perceived as the news. They perceived everything coming from the group was a valid news source. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying that what we see here is social media taking on the role of the national press, and to an extent destabilising and replacing the national press in covering a missing persons case. And I don't think I've seen an example of that to this extent in any cases I can think of, certainly not recently. Firstly, what is Reddit? Reddit is like a giant message board. It's kind of like Usenet would have been in the early 1990s. It's kind of like a news group. It's a story sharing website. It's a place where you can post about cats and cars and true crime and unsolved mysteries. And this is where I decided to place my post in relation to the case of Corrie Mckeague. And in my post, I looked at some of the media coverage on a very small scale, local media that was put out on Facebook, and then I looked at some of the witnesses who had been observing Miss McKeague's behaviour that night, who had made comments about that, and the timeline, just the same kind of stuff that people have looked at on a number of forums. And I noticed there were some discrepancies in the way that Miss McKeague was presented in the Find Corrie Facebook compared with how other witnesses had observed him behaving on that evening. And also the press itself, the local press, had very little to say about the case, and I wondered why that was. I wondered why there was so much silence surrounding the disappearance, because certainly the circumstances were strange, and the coverage was just lacking. There just wasn't anywhere where you could actually post and make a comment at that time. The national press didn't cover it, and several other, shall we say, crime investigation websites for amateur sleuths had closed down the discussion on Mr. McKeague when the discussion went in a direction that they didn't like. So Reddit really was the only source of independent commentary at that time, where you could look at the reports, you could analyse reports from the press, you could analyse information that was coming from Facebook, you could perhaps post about some of the police news conferences that were being broadcast at that time, and the post attracted a a large number of people to come and post and make comments and discuss the case. And that is the nature of Reddit. That's what it does. Reddit investigates the media and Reddit interrogates social media. From my own observation of activity on the Reddit thread I created, it seemed to attract a huge number of new posters in a short space of time, maybe within a week or so from late December to early January. Now, at this point, the Mckeague case was still receiving limited mainstream media coverage. I lost count of the number of times I saw someone say, "Hello, I'm new to Reddit." These were posters with no account history who had been active for perhaps a day or so. There was a lot of public interest in the disappearance of Corrie Mckeague, but I can't recall a Reddit thread growing to over 2,000 comments in a week or so for a topic of local UK interest. Coincidentally, this exponential growth occurred at around the same time that the Find Corrie Facebook group had secured funding of £50,000 to appoint a team of private investigators which specialised in social media analysis and internet data mining. The Find Corrie Just Giving campaign has a couple of points in relation to what the funding is required for. And firstly, to fund the appointment of a private investigator. Secondly, to fund a data analyst to undertake the work the police are not capable of resourcing, collect, collate and analyse all of the information gathered so far and that will continue to be collected. So the public giving money to the campaign were firstly under the impression that the purpose was to appoint a private investigator. However, this was not so, and the funding went directly, I believe, to Mackenzie Intelligence Services with the intention of mining data from social media. So that would be, for example, data from all social media platforms such as Facebook and obviously Reddit. On the Find Corrie website, which is closely linked to the Find Corrie Facebook group run by Nicola Urquhart and Tony Ringe, there is a question raised by the public about why the family chose to use Mackenzie Intelligence Services and not another company. And the answer is given that Mackenzie Intelligence Services are focusing on the collection and collation activities in support of the major investigation team, that is the police investigation work. This is why we brought in an intelligence services organisation to begin with, not a private investigator, which we may yet do, although we would only use one that does not sell stories to the national gutter press. The first task was not to investigate. Suffolk Police have that capability. What was needed was structured information and a collection plan to fill any identified gaps. So what seems to be said here is that the police do not have the resources or the capability to gather the information that Mackenzie Intelligence Services are capable of gathering. The intention was then to pass on this information from Mackenzie Intelligence Services to the police, which would be used in the investigation of Corrie Mckeague's disappearance. An article in the Daily Record suggested that Mackenzie Intelligence Services was not a suitable option for investigation into a missing person, and this article raised several issues in connection with Mackenzie Intelligence Services. Speaking about Mackenzie Intelligence Services, a spokesman for the Association of British Investigators said to the Daily Record, "A look at their website raises the question why such an agency, without any visible experience in the field of missing person inquiries and lacking transparency or financial probity, should have been selected to conduct the investigation, especially when the cost for the engagement is sourced from public donated funds." The spokesman went on to say that the Association of British Investigators had previously contacted Nicola Urquhart through Facebook and offered their services free of charge, and I would assume that this was declined. Perhaps what Mackenzie Intelligence Services lacks in the field of expertise in locating missing persons, it makes up for with its connections to the British military and other agencies. From the website of Mackenzie Intelligence Services, it is stated, MIS is a continued success story of UK military intelligence veterans transitioning from the military into the private sector. In the last 6 years, we have taken our rich, hard-earned experience from the past and mixed that knowledge with today's technologies in order to disrupt problems, old and new, in the current commercial landscape.